is everything so surreal?
Karma: The Dark World is the first game from developer Pollard Studios, and though the initial trailers looked interesting, I don't think my hopes were set hugely high for it. Trailers are a powerful tool, but also a manipulation. They aren't fully indicative of the end game and often highly scripted. I don't think this is a cynical or conspiratorial take, it's just how marketing works. You need to drip feed just the right parts to get someone interested, and that takes many forms. Glitches and bugs almost never appear in trailers because the team behind it are trying to offer you a glimpse into the optimal experience, not necessarily the average one. A first-time team, an ambitious project paying direct homage to David Lynch, Hideo Kojima, and George Orwell. It's not just the relatively green team that sets those alarm bells off, but just how ambitious this game's influences are, and it wears them neatly on its sleeve. I'm happy to say that, despite some problems with it, Karma: The Dark World surprised me multiple times and left an impression once those credits started rolling. Here's what happened when I played it for myself. It's hard to know where to even start with giving you a rough idea of what exactly Karma: The Dark World is. I could say it's a psychological horror verging on thriller where you play a worker under the all-encompassing Leviathan Corporation. Set in Germany in 1984, it's about as on the nose as you would expect from a game that references 1984 heavily, that is, literally set in 1984. Playing a worker under that corporation, dealing with amnesia, and tasked with invading the brains of suspects disloyal to Leviathan, the goal is to figure out the weird happenings under this corporation that you aren't technically even allowed to know, whilst figuring out how you're all tied to it. You are an operative and loyal, yet darkness lingers just moments away. While this is an okay expression of the setup, it's also sort of not. See, Karma is an incredibly esoteric game. I'd actually argue it's really brave for it. I mentioned that this game is the first from a new studio, not purely to temper expectations, but also to let you know where my head's at. This game feels so unburdened by the need to make you understand it that it's downright charming for it. Ending explained YouTube channels will be eating good here because a lot of it is up to interpretation or never even told in the first place. One of my favourite moments in Karma: The Dark World was actually about half a day after I'd finished it, where me and my partner looked at each other and said, "So, what was that?" This was quickly followed by literal chalk on a blackboard as we gave our interpretation of what was going on and why. Let's go back for a moment though. Awakening in a small ward, hooked up to machines and oozing some sort of black liquid, Daniel McGovern, our lead, wanders about some sort of facility. As you look out the windows, things feel off, and you go through the settings menu, except as part of the game, and this is all meant to make you feel icky. It acknowledges you in a way, before you are placed into a chair, given a tape intended to reclaim your memories, and submerged into some sort of ooze. It's a striking opening that feels intended to confuse you, and this more meta playing with the boundaries of the game thing doesn't really come back. This is actually part of what I like about Karma. Like a progressive rock song afraid to fully commit to a chorus, the 10 or so hours Karma takes to beat never really lets you feel comfortable. Your role as Daniel is a roam agent for the Thought Bureau. I'm sure you can see the pretty obvious parallel to 1984 there. This makes you dive into people's mind and gives the game room to grow and explore its themes. Given that most of the gameplay is comprised of just movement, looking around, and maybe clicking a button or two, it actually gets a surprising amount out of it. There's a Project Zero style camera sequence, chasing lightly in the vein of Amnesia, and a rather wonderful moment of clarity that blends elements of flow with journey. The main thing you do in Karma is walk to and from locations, yet I found myself surprised every hour or so by a gameplay direction it took until practically the end of the game. It's not wildly expressive and ever-changing in its gameplay, it's just varied enough to keep me engaged. Karma: The Dark World is actually a rather impressive game in a lot of ways. The visuals are very strong, both in clarity and intent. It's blatantly unafraid to play around with scale, which serves to help its grander narrative, but it also leans on its references for its visual identity to almost give you a ledge to grab onto as you sink into its sickly narrative. There are plenty of great visual moments as enemies attack you, eyes watch over you, and you interact with the world. One scene in particular very directly references David Lynch's Red Room, but also shows a story strong enough to justify the inclusion. That dread, alienation, the feeling the walls are closing in that the original Red Room scenes at least partially represent are too reflected in Karma: The Dark World. It uses puzzle pieces to get through locations as a brutal gut punch to drive home some of the more wretched decisions and structures in its world. Though not every puzzle is equal in quality, they are equal in thought, and that much certainly comes through as you play. Oddly, puzzles aren't quite as hard to interpret as parts of the story. Some of them are surprisingly easy, and others manage to be just challenging enough to get you to pause for a brief moment. Some of them do play cleverly into the world or the new mechanics it teaches you, but many of them left me wishing it had just one more element. It often feels like the game teaches you the puzzle, lets you figure it out, and then takes not a step further. I was always hoping it would push up the complexity of its mechanics just one more level. Despite being abstracted and esoteric, the way Karma is written feels very human. It empathizes, understands radicalism, and builds that into the themes of the game. However, in a world like Karma, radicalism can be easier to defend. Instead, one sequence of sections puts you in the shoes of someone working mostly in the Bureau's interests, and theirs is perhaps the most gutting and touching scene in the entire game. After hours of searching through the dark parts of people's minds to find the monsters that lurk there, it props up this wonderful moment, a fire building among the dark of night and some sort of hope in a hopeless world. Daniel himself doesn't feel as well characterized as this game's side characters, but I think this is mostly intentional. He's a vessel for the player. I had intended to stop playing the game and go to bed about an hour prior to hitting that section before, but it flowed so thoroughly that I just couldn't do it. I had to see where it was going. Karma also touches on the dark in striking ways too. The deterioration of a family and the effects that has on everything else, the ways that everyone around you seems to be suffering and giving their life for an entity that you can't understand. It also makes you a part of that. There's this moment where you are told of sexual exploitation and the ties to poverty and power that make it near impossible to escape. Then you realize afterwards that your desperation to figure out what's going on effectively puts you in the role of a voyeur, seeing the path taken by those exploiting them in the first place. It's effective and rather chilling. Empathy is effectively a lens though, and not everything is given this treatment. Leviathan is a shadowy, propagandistic entity that feels insurmountable, and you see the effects of that in these TV-headed humanoids around you. They aren't given lives and personalities, they are shells to add texture to the world. Unfortunately, Karma is not all highs. Though I appreciate some of the esoteric writing, some of it veers too hard into that direction, and fails to materially give you enough to keep you picking up the breadcrumbs. Not every story, note, and computer adds to the world, and this can occasionally be alienating in a way that doesn't serve the story. If those fleeting moments were all as striking, it would have earned its strangeness a little more. As well as this, when the story starts to properly explain itself, it starts to feel oddly choreographed. Two of the bigger plot twists are oddly guessable just hours in because they are very trope heavy, and this makes Karma's reliance on references a bit of a double-edged sword. 1984 is the answer to multiple puzzles, and Karma lays it on very thick. Its reference points feel familiar, and some of its symbolism and imagery does too. It does a really good job of nailing the look of 80s computers, but this too only further enunciates what I'm getting at. It has these great original moments that are laced in between things I've seen before. I also think a lot of its tone and language will be love it or hate it for a lot of people. Maybe noting that something inspired by 1984 is a bit heavy-handed is sort of funny, but there's very little subtlety here. Saying this is literally 1984 under your breath as you see yet another thematic reference cuts into its vision somewhat. However, this also allows it to not pull any punches. The game is quite dark in a lot of ways and has this wretched, cloying atmosphere. Everything feels genuinely pathetic and pitiable. Characters are slimy, but also saddening. Things rarely feel purely driven by ire or anger. They feel like actors within a system, swaying as the current takes them into the meat grinder. It's also a game that's oddly good to watch on replay because of it. Even watching through my clips as I write this video, I see characters, themes, items early on that feel revelatory in hindsight. The game is told in a non-linear fashion and often sporadically jumps to pretty much anywhere it wants. It isn't nearly as coherently displayed as some of the best non-linear stories, but it's easy to see that as a reflection of intent. The psychological part of this thriller is there at pretty much every moment. That atmosphere is only helped by some occasionally fantastic music. Pianos, violins, and voices work to give it all this ethereal feel, where the rhythmic pounding of drums and steel cuts sharply into you. It moves from driven synth to light, twinkly strings and makes these brighter, more powerful moments shine even more. From its look to its feel to its sound, there's clearly a lot of care put into Karma, and how esoteric something feels only adds to it. It's genuinely a rather brave first outing for the studio and feels so self-absorbed that it all works rather well. Unfortunately, the voice acting isn't quite as strong as the other elements of Karma's sound. Delivery is mostly okay, sometimes veering into hammy, and our main character grunts a lot. I think the intent is to make everything sound painful and laboured so you feel like part of the narrative, but some of the voice acting works actively against the immersion it intends to instill. It's worth noting, in a lot of ways, I feel quite confused by Karma. Not always by its narrative, but my feelings on the game as a total package. It's messy and derivative, yet paradoxically rather creative. Some of its moments really struck me and others fell flat. It's obscure in the way it puts itself forward, yet also occasionally obvious. It's a spark of hope in an otherwise dark city, or perhaps the dark undertones sitting just inches away from your view. It's rather full of itself and also striking. It may lean on its references, but it does so earnestly and with enough power to slip through the cracks of its shell and leak into the outside world. Thank you for watching my video on Karma the Dark World. I'm not too sure what to say here. I have lots of thoughts. So many that I feel like if I kept writing, this would be a way longer video than it needed to be. This is worth a play, depending on if you're okay with the caveats I set forward. It's weird. It's definitely quite linear in the way it approaches gameplay outside of those special sections. It's first person, it's mostly grabbing buttons and looking at info, and those puzzles are okay. But also it has these great moments. The music is at worst interesting and at best almost stunning at parts, and some of the imagery is great. If you get a chance, I'd advise looking through the art book. There's some really lovely reference images in there. But yeah, this was a strange one, and I felt quite confused writing it, but also parts of it stuck with me. So I feel like that's a good thing. There's a lot here to unpack. It's something, if you have the chance to play and it's within budget or it's on sale or it comes free one day, I think give it a whirl and let me know what you think. If you do like my thoughts, even if you don't like the game or you like the game more than me, subscribing would really help me out. Giving a like, maybe a comment, those kinds of things, engagement or whatever. It helps, and some people have connected to my recent videos, which means a lot to me. If this connected with you, then subscribe. That would be great. Thanks.